A spaceship carrying many alien creatures actually crashed directly onto Earth. Now the aliens have really come right to our doorstep. But what's worse is that the alien creatures on the spaceship are far more than just alien.
Oi.
In the face of such a catastrophic disaster, how should humanity get through this crisis? Today let's take a look at the first series of the Alien franchise. Without further ado, let's start right away. The timeline of this series is set in 2120, 6 years after Alien, Covenant, and 2 years before at this time. Technology in the human world is developing at a rapid pace. The pursuit of immortality mainly takes three forms. The first is humans enhanced with machinery, the second is synthetics as artificial intelligence entities, the third is hybrids, that is, downloading human consciousness into synthetic bodies. Whichever technology wins, the enterprise behind that technology will rule the universe. Let's first turn our attention to outer space. The Maginot, a spacecraft belonging to Weyland-Yutani Corporation, is preparing to return to Earth after completing its mission, and in the Alien series, Weyland-Yutani Corporation, in order to obtain live aliens for bioweapons research, doesn't hesitate to sacrifice the lives of many crew members. It is also an important behind-the-scenes force driving the plot. The mission of this spacecraft is no exception. It still involves collecting alien creatures from other planets. Currently, the spacecraft is 1.3 billion kilometers away from Earth. After a while, the cryogenic pods are opened, the crew members wake up one after another, then comes the classic dining scene from the Alien series, but crew member Jack is excluded by other crew members. Jack looks at the woman on the ground, and a strange smile appears on the corner of his mouth. Could he be secretly causing trouble like David? It's still unknown for now. The crew members start discussing the major powers on Earth. Now, national governments on Earth have long become a thing of the past. The entire world is divided among 5 super enterprises. Weyland-Yutani Corporation is one of them, and the smallest giant among them is named Boy. He is also the youngest billionaire in history. His company mainly researches and develops synthetics and artificial intelligence. As they talk, everyone starts discussing the current problem. The spacecraft will take another 4 months to return to Earth. But currently, the spacecraft's communication is interrupted. The log files also seem to be damaged. The spacecraft has also consumed too much fuel. At this time, someone proposes to throw those strange samples into outer space.
It's a real suggestion. Those things give me the creeps.
Yeah, me too. Specimens are the mission.
Facehuggers are definitely creepy, but for these few samples, the spacecraft has already lost several people, so they can't be easily discarded. In the end, this conversation ended unhappily. On the other side, crew member Black Girl feeds mice to the captured live samples. After the other crew members have eaten and drunk their fill, they are about to start a new round of cryogenic sleep. Little do they know that a bloody crisis is quietly brewing. At the same time, on Earth, at the Genius Neverland Research Center, today is a very important day for Boy's company. If the experiment is successful, it will be the first time in history that human consciousness and synthetic bodies are perfectly integrated. The experimental subject, Marcy, is a young girl. She is very different from her peers. When she sees the scorpion in the glass tank, Marcy's first reaction is to destroy it. The researcher beside her guided her step by step, asking Marcy to put herself in the scorpion's shoes. What reaction she would have if she were the scorpion. The words had just reached this point. Another researcher came to take Marcy away. Before leaving, Marcy asked the man if he would kill the scorpion. The man retorted by asking Marcy, "Do you want me to kill it?" Marcy's answer was no. Then Marcy followed the female researcher to the laboratory. Marcy saw that a female synthetic was lying on the consciousness transfer bed. Obviously, she was the carrier of Marcy's consciousness, and their boss, Boy, had been waiting for a long time. Today would be a moment to witness a miracle. Boy asked Marcy if she wanted to see a magic trick. Immediately after, the huge screen above began to play a cartoon.
I want my brother.
I told you you can see him when you wake up.
Marcy also lay down on the consciousness transfer bed. She turned her head to look at the synthetic and gave her a new name, Wendy. As the instrument started, all of Marcy's consciousness from childhood to the present was transferred to the synthetic body. Then the new hybrid, Wendy, was formed. In this way, the terminally ill little girl instantly gained a super strong physique. She jumped off the cliff with a light leap. It turned out that because the minds of adults can't be transferred to synthetic bodies, the company thus used terminally ill children, and because synthetics can't grow any further, therefore, only children's consciousness can be transferred to adult synthetic bodies. Moreover, synthetics can't secrete hormones and various other substances like humans. Therefore, in theory, Wendy should no longer be able to experience human emotional fluctuations. Upon hearing this, Wendy questioned, "Am I still considered human like this?" After a moment of silence, the researcher replied, "It depends on your mood, you can be whatever you want." Then the female researcher offered a stuffed toy to divert Wendy's attention. Then she told Wendy that the other children, who were going to undergo the experiment, had arrived. As the elder sister, Wendy was to help them complete the transfer. Later, Wendy met 5 children who voluntarily accepted the consciousness transfer. Almost all of them were terminally ill. They came here because they believed boys claimed that he could cure them.
When do we get to go home?
You don't.
Later, with Wendy's comfort, the children completed the transfer. From then on, they all gained immortality, but the price was that they could never go home again, because this experiment itself is confidential, and as far as their families are concerned, they were declared dead a long time ago. On the other side, aboard the Maginot spaceship, the mature alien had already started killing. The synthetic Lauren hid in the control room and quickly typed up the flight log, recording that the samples had escaped and all human crew members had been killed. At this moment, there were human crew members outside begging for help, but Lauren stepped forward to weld the hatch shut, leaving them to be killed by the alien. After killing everyone, the alien began to forcefully break down the hatch. At this point, the spaceship could no longer land safely and was bound to crash into Earth. Lauren finished handling the flight log and hid in the impact-proof cabin before the alien could get in, but the liquid sprayed from the alien's mouth still splashed onto Lauren's face. As Lauren put on her mask, the spaceship also began to fall. The spaceship is heading straight for Earth. At the same time, in Boy's Genius City, Wendy's brother Mike returned home to rest for a few days after completing his mission. Mike is a medic working with the military. Like Wendy, he also works for Boy's Genius Enterprise, and Wendy from the Genius Neverland Research Center is standing in front of the video surveillance, watching her brother's movements. The researchers noticed this and paid close attention to it, although Wendy misses her brother very much. But earlier, Genius Enterprise told Mike that his sister had passed away. Moreover, Wendy's original human body had long been disposed of by Genius Enterprise, so if there are no accidents, it is likely that the two will never meet again in this life. But accidents just happen. The next day, when Mike ran upstairs to relax, he suddenly saw a spaceship falling from the sky. Mike's team immediately ended their vacation. After putting on their equipment, they rushed to the crash site to rescue the people. Under the command of the officer, the soldiers entered the building to rescue people. This spaceship belonging to Weyland-Yutani Corporation actually crashed into a residential building in Genius Corporation's area. In addition, there are aliens on the spaceship. This disaster is destined to not end easily. The shock wave from the impact made the entire building shake. From time to time, fragments of walls fall and injure residents. Mike's team entered at the risk of danger. The interior is filled with smoke, and the visibility is very poor. Everyone can only shout while walking in and listen carefully for any cries for help. As a result, they actually saw the hull of the crashed spaceship. It seems that the ship crashed all the way to the bottom, but Mike felt a sense of unease when looking at the damaged gap on the spaceship. Later, the officer asked 5 people to check what was going on with the spaceship. Mike was among them. After a brief inspection, someone recognized that this spaceship should be a science vessel of Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Then the squad leader divided the team into 2 groups, which advanced towards the 2 side passages inside the spaceship respectively. At this moment, inside the spaceship's cockpit, Lauren cut through the hatch and climbed out, but soon he noticed that other people had entered the spaceship. As an android loyal to the company, Lauren sent a message to the headquarters, reporting that someone had boarded the ship. The status of the cargo is unknown. He requested the headquarters to quickly send reinforcement troops to secure the scene. On the other side, Genius Neverland Research Center, Wendy is cooperating with researchers to collect brain activity, but the next second, she found that her brother had gone to a dangerous area to perform a mission. At this time, Boy also received this news.
A deep space research vessel loaded with who knows what. I think that's ours now.
Boy was just about to send troops to rescue people. Wendy took the initiative to run to Boy and proposed that they, the hybrids, go to rescue the residents. The reason is that they are agile, strong, and unbeatable, since Boy created them. He should have confidence in them. Boy was curious about the reason why Wendy did this. Paul, an employee beside him, explained that Wendy's brother is a medic in the tactical team and is currently on duty there. This statement immediately aroused Boy's interest. Judging from Wendy's body language, she still has human emotional expressions.
If I didn't know better, I'd say she was human.
I am human.
Boy became interested and agreed to let the hybrids go to carry out the mission, but he wanted Paul to go as the leader, and during the mission, all technical personnel must be on standby. They will monitor the brain functions, emotional reactions, and performance of the enhanced physiological structures of the group. Then Wendy ran back to her room to pack things. Then she came to inform the other 5 hybrids. In this way, the 6 quickly gathered, led by Paul. They boarded the transport ship and headed for the spaceship crash site. During this time, Paul looked strange and told Wendy, "Your kind, humans, used to be food. Although you strive to develop technology to prove that humans have reached the top, but once a more powerful creature appears, humans will still be food, and humans start moving towards death from the day they are born. This is a fate that no one can escape."
He's not gonna die. I'm gonna save him.
Back to the inside of the spaceship, Lauren, holding a weapon, patrolled cautiously. Suddenly, he heard the voices of the rescue team. When the 2-person team entered the same corridor, Lauren was no longer there. The 2 continued to explore inside, but didn't notice Lauren hiding on the side and secretly observing. Then the 2 entered the laboratory where the live samples were kept. They couldn't help but curse, looking at the facehuggers soaked in formalin. The hairs on their bodies stood on end. Then the 2 found a corpse on the ground. They felt that something was very wrong here. The 2 didn't dare to stay any longer, so they quickly withdrew from the room. Turning around, they came face to face with Lauren's gun. Although the 2 stated that they were from the rescue team, but Lauren still forced them to put down their weapons. Then he forced them back into the laboratory and cuffed them to the same pipe. Only then did Lauren go to chase the escaped samples. But as soon as Lauren left, the strange bug crawled out of the collar. Then it crawled to the man's neck and bit down. As the man let out a shrill scream, the bug sucked blood and swelled into a large sarcoma. The man dropped dead on the spot. His companion was almost scared to wet his pants, but immediately after, another bug jumped onto his face. Then there was another scream. On the other side, Mike followed the squad leader to the cryogenic pods. He quickly noticed that many crew members were dead inside the pods. It seemed they had been killed by something. One of them even had their abdomen torn open, as if some creature had burst out of it, and then crawled away somewhere. The 3 immediately followed the trail of blood. On the way, Mike always felt an eerie feeling on his back, as if something was following them. But when he turned around, he saw nothing. Then they came to the surgery pod room and saw several more bodies there. Mike checked carefully and found that these people didn't die from the crash. Judging from their purple lips, it was more like they died of suffocation. Then Mike lit up the screen and found traces of alien foreign objects in the deceased's digestive tract. However, this wasn't part of the rescue team's mission. Their task was to finish searching the spaceship quickly.
Stage just gets better and better.
Then the 3 continued searching forward, and found that the passage was broken due to the crash. The squad leader took the lead to search downward. At the same time, Genius Neverland Research Center, the female researcher was watching videos of the children from before. Boss Boy arrived uninvited. Boy took over the company 10 years ago. He developed it step by step to its current scale. He can be said to be a true genius. Now he regards competition with other companies as another type of intellectual contest. It all depends on whose product is better. But the female researcher said, if the children are no longer human, then what have they won? After hearing this, Boy told her that the purpose of creating a hybrid person, with such great effort and money, was to create an extremely intelligent creature, so that he can debate with someone whose thoughts amaze him, even if it's only once in a lifetime. And currently, the one who fascinates Boy the most is Wendy. back to Mike's side. As the three walked, the road ahead broke again. They needed to jump to the opposite staircase, but if they were even slightly careless, they would fall and lose their lives. Soon the squad leader and the female team member jumped over, but when it was Mike's turn to jump, some liquid suddenly fell from above. Mike quickly raised his gun and aimed. Seeing the alien monster chasing after him, Mike hurriedly rushed forward despite the pain. Fortunately, he escaped into the elevator and temporarily escaped danger. After that, Mike contacted the headquarters, reported the information about the monster he had just seen, and requested more reinforcements. But the signal couldn't get through. Mike had to bandage his wound first. At this moment, he remembered what happened yesterday. At that time, Mike went to the relevant agency and applied to terminate his work contract 7 months early. The reason was that he was going to Mars to study at a medical university, but what Mike didn't know was that his sister, who had been declared dead, was watching him through the monitor.
Have a heart. Or face my fury.
Face your fury what?
This is a line from the animated movie Ice Age, and it's one of the favorite line jokes between the siblings. So Mike was shocked when he heard this, and Boy, who was monitoring Wendy, also discovered that Wendy was communicating with her brother by rewriting the code. They hurriedly controlled the machine to interrupt further communication between the siblings, and rejected Mike's resignation application. Time returns to the present. At this time, the transport ship carrying Wendy has landed near the residential building, and as soon as Wendy got off the transport ship, she felt something from the building, then a creaking sound rang in her ears. Wendy quickly asked Helen beside her if she heard that sound. Helen shook her head blankly. Wendy frowned, and a trace of unease rose in her heart. Then she followed everyone into the command tent. They learned that the building has a total of 100 floors, 80 floors above ground and 20 floors underground. Currently, the internal communication of the building has not been restored. Damage reports are also being continuously updated. The head of the rescue team is worried about gas pipelines and fires, and also worried about the stability of the fuel source on the ship, not to mention the existing radiation. Here, Paul is talking to the person in charge. Wendy rewrote the code to adjust the monitoring until she saw her brother's figure. Wendy held her breath and zoomed in on the screen, asking which floor this was on. After learning it was the 65th floor, Wendy hurried to save her brother. Paul then asked the hybrid Asen to accompany Wendy. He led the remaining hybrids to investigate the spaceship. At the same time, Boy is monitoring the movements of the hybrids through the surveillance. Suddenly, a subordinate reported that Weyland Yutani Corporation was calling. After the call was answered, the person in charge of Yutani Corporation apologized for the spaceship crash, saying that they are willing to pay corresponding compensation for this. However, there are some personal belongings on the spaceship that need to be recovered. Boy is very smart. He realized that the things on the spaceship were not simple, but the person in charge insisted that it was a space research ship, but everything on the ship should be regarded as private property. She requested to send a team over to ensure the safety of the ship and take away the things. Boy refused on the grounds that the building was unsafe, and also said that if they dared to send people to invade, it would be an act of hostility. But after hanging up the video call, Boy told his subordinates that he wanted those things in the ship. On the other side, Paul led 4 hybrids into the spaceship. They soon discovered a bizarre-looking alien creature. It looked like a plant on the outside, but its top structure was trembling slightly as if breathing. Paul asked 3 hybrids to go to other areas to find equipment that could capture it. So the 3 came to the laboratory, and as soon as they entered, they saw an alien creature. Since they were still children with immature minds, even though they were skilled, they were still quite scared when they saw the scene. Immediately after, the 3 saw an injured kitten struggling to crawl towards them. The next second, the eyeball monster suddenly pounced on one of the hybrids, trying to parasitize it. Fortunately, the hybrid was strong enough to throw it flying. Then another hybrid pinned down the eyeball monster, and this finally resolved the crisis. At the same time, Wendy found her brother's backpack. He must be nearby, but soon Wendy saw scratch marks on the elevator door. They looked like they were made by a large creature like a bear. At this time, Wendy had escaped to the residential area. He was still trying to contact the outside world, but still got nothing. However, he managed to meet up with the squad leader. They heard that the residents of one room on this floor had not evacuated, so the two knocked on the door and told them to hurry out to escape, but the residents were holding a classical carnival party and ignored Mike completely. But the next second, Mike saw the alien behind the squad leader, but it was already too late to warn. The poor squad leader was killed by the alien. The residents, hearing the gunshots, even dared to run out to watch the commotion, and the alien broke into the house and killed them all. The death of the squad leader stimulated Mike. He picked up his gun and chased into the house, only to see that in just a short while, everyone in the house had been killed. The arrogant upper-class people just now were left with only half their bodies. The next second, the alien jumped down from the second floor. Mike was about to dodge when the alien pulled him back with its tail. At the critical moment, someone used a gun to stun the alien. This person was none other than the synthetic Lauren who had come. However, Lauren raised his gun and also stunned Mike. Then he wrapped the alien in a layer of film. He dragged the alien, wanting to rush back to the spaceship. Lauren had just put down her gun and wanted to drag the alien into the elevator. Several rescue team members came walking towards her. After seeing something moving inside the cocoon on the ground, the group became alert and told Lauren to put her hands up. Watching as the alien was about to break out of the cocoon, Lauren realized the trouble was huge. Just as Lauren thought she was done for, the alien was lured away by the other living humans. Lauren narrowly escaped by luck, back to the inside of the spaceship. Paul still stood guard in front of the strange creature with his men. He felt that although this thing looked like a plant, it was more likely an animal. Just as he was thinking, the sound of a team member calling him came from not far away. Paul had to ask another person to keep an eye on the strange creature. While he went to the laboratory, reminded by the mixed human, Paul didn't rashly remove the lid, but instead went to the equipment to read the messages. It turned out that Paul was also a synthetic human. Paul soon read a lot of information. This was a deep space research vessel. That is to say, these strange species were all samples collected by the deceased crew members, and in the corridor, a tentacle protruded from the flower bud. This thing opened several small tentacles towards the mixed human. Just as it was about to move, the mixed human was called to the laboratory by his companion. At this time, Paul discovered several suspected eggs on the floor of a certain room. So he sent another mixed human to support Wendy. The three of them must seal off the room, and no one is allowed to enter or exit until the hazardous materials disposal team arrives. On the other side, Wendy and Asen came to the hall and saw human remains all over the floor. Shortly after, the two found Mike in the room. Wendy was very happy to see her brother again, but at this moment, Wendy had changed into a synthetic human body. Mike couldn't recognize her. The next second, Wendy received Paul's order. She needed to go to the front section of the spaceship to keep an eye on the invasive species in the area. Wendy had to take Mike with her. Unexpectedly, Asen revealed that their bodies were synthetic humans, but their consciousnesses were those of human children.
Don't you dare.
That's your sister.
Wendy wanted to stop it, but it was already too late. She had to explain the whole story in a few words. For example, having switched to a synthetic body, and that they could no longer go home. At first, Mike didn't believe it. After all, he had attended his sister's funeral. Wendy had to mention some codes known only to the siblings. Only then did Mike finally believe that his sister wasn't dead. The siblings hugged each other tightly. Subsequently, the group arrived at the area Paul had mentioned, and saw the several strange eggs on the ground. Boyd in the distance also saw this scene through the mixed human's eyes. His eyes sparkled with excited light. Suddenly, Wendy heard that sound again, and felt that something seemed to be approaching. But before she could figure it out, the alien rushed into the room and abducted Mike. Wendy was extremely anxious. She told Asen to watch the eggs while she hurried to chase after. David quickly learned all the information about the whole spaceship by connecting to the spaceship's equipment. From this, it's learned that the crew captured a total of 5 unprecedented species, but on the way back to Earth, some crew members accidentally let the creatures escape. Eventually, this disaster was caused, and the hybrid Mary looked at the strange creature in front of her. Suddenly, she remembered her previous human body, and the scene of being attacked by the eyeball monster. Her companion saw that. She was in a trance and asked what was wrong. Mary said, "Why don't they let us keep our original names after creating us? Why do they have to use Lost Boys as a code name?" The companion thought for a moment and said, "Maybe it's because Lost Boys don't grow up."
But they put us in grown-up bodies. We're not even all boys, we're half girls.
Mary still couldn't figure out why Wendy was Wendy. Here's a digression, in fact. In the Peter Pan story, Wendy is the eldest daughter of the Darling family. It was also she who later led her younger brothers back to the real world. In addition, the remaining hybrids were all given names of other boys from Peter Pan. Maybe in the end, Wendy will lead these hybrids to escape Boy's control. David suddenly interrupted their discussion. It turned out that Boy called David. Boy announced that the mission was no longer to save the people, but to take control of the scene and bring back all the alien creatures on the spaceship for research. David was worried that this would cause a conflict with Weyland Tanaka Corporation, but Boy didn't think so. It was clearly Tanaka Corporation that messed things up themselves. Now that a research project worth 1 trillion yuan had fallen into his hands, how could he give it up? Boy had already made a decision on this matter. David and the others couldn't change it. Then Boy asked how his child was doing, but he was surprised to learn that David had actually let Wendy go out to look for her brother alone. Before leaving, he had instructed that Wendy must be kept under watch.
I thought you were supposed to be better than a man, but all I'm hearing are excuses. Bring her in. Now.
At the same time, Wendy chased all the way. Finally, she heard her brother's cry from inside a box truck in the underground parking lot, but the other person told her not to get close, saying it was a trap. But Wendy was worried about her brother's safety, so she still ran over, trying to save her brother. But Mike told Wendy to leave quickly, because the next second, an alien appeared at the rear of the truck. Wendy immediately picked up a crowbar and walked over. Mike broke free from his restraints and followed his sister, but when the two approached, the alien didn't attack. Then the two heard a thudding sound from above. Wendy thrust the crowbar upward. The strong acid inside the alien flowed down instantly. Then the whole carriage was knocked over by the alien. When Mike climbed up again, there was no sign of his sister in the carriage. He quickly picked up his weapon and went outside the carriage. Just as Mike was about to die, Wendy timely hooked the inner jaw that the alien stretched out. Then she dragged the alien straight to the warehouse beside her. As she walked that way, she told her brother to activate the door closing button. It was obvious that she planned to cut off the alien's body. With the warehouse door, Mike got up despite the severe pain, rushed to the power box and pressed the switch. But just as the plan was about to succeed, the alien took the initiative to cut off its inner jaw, and instead hooked Wendy into the warehouse. When Mike struggled to open the door, the alien's head had already been cut off, but Wendy's body was also severely injured. Then Mike also couldn't hold on and fell to the ground. On the other side, the hybrid Charlie was still standing guard. Suddenly, he stepped on something under his foot, picked it up and saw that it seemed to be a piece of skin. It seemed to be the one shed by the alien just now. It wasn't long before his companion arrived, and told Charlie everything that had happened in the laboratory. But just after the two exchanged information, John, who had escaped death, suddenly held them at gunpoint, and told them to stay as far away from those eggs as possible. Charlie and his companion obeyed. From them, John finally learned that the spaceship had crashed in the territory of the Genius Corporation. But after only a few words of conversation, John realized that these two synthetics seemed a bit different.
You're like a couple of kids.
We're not kids!
Yeah, no, we're not.
But this kind of attitude of trying to cover up only made them more suspicious. It's just that John didn't pursue it further, since he saw they weren't a threat. In fact, John was the security director of this research ship. The task assigned by the company was to find alien eggs. But after years of adventure to bring the eggs onto the ship, one of the eggs hatched a monster, and the company abandoned the lives of the crew. That's why John only focused on protecting these eggs. As John spoke, he copied the spaceship data. Then he asked the two, "If you were me, would you protect those crew members?" Unexpectedly, the two mentioned their parents in their answers. John was suddenly shocked. How could synthetics have the concept of parents in their minds? So after the data transmission was completed, John quietly took something out from under his nail, and then went straight for Charlie. Just as the two were about to conflict, David arrived at the scene in time. Although John let go, that small thing stuck to Charlie's neck. But as John stepped back, one of the alien eggs actually became restless. It seems that John is not the android he claims to be, but a cyborg enhanced by machinery. Essentially, he still belongs to humans. When the alien egg opened, John immediately escaped from the spaceship. David didn't chase after him. After that, the Genius Corporation completely took over the 5 alien creatures. They took Wendy, who was unresponsive, and the seriously injured Mike, back to the Genius Neverland Research Center together. Boy looked at these strange creatures, and his expression became more and more excited, and Wendy was taken to the laboratory for treatment, just as the 2 researchers, who felt sorry for her, were about to secretly say a few bad words about their boss. Boy suddenly appeared in front of them. The atmosphere suddenly became a bit awkward. Luckily, Boy didn't hear what the 2 were saying. He just came to check on Wendy's condition. The 2 researchers promised to fix Wendy, which finally sent the meddlesome Boy away. On the other side, the 5 alien creatures were placed in a very high-level laboratory. The more David looked at them, the more he thought these little things were charming. Shortly after, Boy also came to check on the situation.
New life forms with acid for blood, like an undiscovered country.
But the next second, the alien egg showed signs of opening again. David was shocked, and after realizing what was happening, he quickly pushed Boy out of the laboratory. Then he explained to the confused Boy that these alien eggs were equivalent to parasites. They would wait for organic life to approach, then they would take advantage of the unprepared moment to complete the parasitic attack, and eventually hatch some kind of primitive creature. For example, on the crashed research ship, the bodies in the cryotubes were killed from the inside. That is to say, the primitive creatures must have been gestated in human hosts. Only then did Boy realize the seriousness of the matter. He immediately ordered that non-synthetics weren't allowed to enter or exit the laboratory, and David was in charge of all the research inside. At the same time, the 2 hybrids who were present with David were questioned by a staff member named Jack.
Are we in trouble?
Why? Have you done something?
No, sir. Exactly what we were told.
But Jack didn't believe their words. Then he asked about John. The 2 hesitated in answering the questions, with nothing suspicious. Later, Jack told the 2 that there was no trace of John at the scene. They thought John had successfully slipped out of the cordon. Although the technicians recorded the footage captured by the 2's retinal cameras, they failed to hear clearly what John whispered to Charlie. That was the reason why Jack came to ask. Charlie had to reply truthfully. John said, "When is a machine not a machine?" Jack chuckled and didn't ask further, but he didn't know that the whole interrogation process was seen by David. Was he trying to do something? On the other side, in Genius City, John, who had slipped out of the cordon, had mixed into the crowd. He used his skill of $0 purchase to successfully steal a mobile phone. Then John immediately called the company. But now, 65 years had passed, and things on Earth had long since changed. The person in charge of the company was no longer Tanaka, whom John knew, but Tanaka's granddaughter. After John said that he had information about alien creatures, the boss asked him to come back to make a report, but John said he had a way to get the creatures back.
These creatures, they are my life's work, and I'm gonna get them back.
After John finished speaking, he hung up the phone. Then he threw away the stolen phone in one go. Inside the Neverland Research Center, the hybrid Curly took the initiative to run to Boy, and expressed dissatisfaction with Boy's favoritism towards Wendy. In Curly's opinion, she was the best. Wendy was just a failure whose mind was full of her brother, but she would think about things, such as how to change the world. Curly even said that if one day she became Boy, she would do better than Boy. Upon hearing this, Boy immediately became interested. After all, Boy had always believed that geniuses refer to gifted children, because only children can enter a world full of infinite imagination. So Boy promised to give Curly the opportunity to learn more knowledge. But this didn't mean that Curly surpassed Wendy to become Boy's favorite hybrid. It was just that Curly joined the competition for favor. At night, Charlie unexpectedly heard John's voice again. It was the small device implanted by John that worked. John was inducing Charlie to tell the truth, while searching online for information about Boy. Charlie was very wary at first, but as a child with immature mentality, he had no ability to resist in front of John. John first secretly asked how old Charlie was today. Seeing that he was very vigilant about this, John immediately changed his strategy and said that he had once been a father.
Everybody needs a friend. Will you be my friend?
At this point, Charlie completely let down his guard and agreed to be friends with John. John immediately showed a triumphant smile. Then he left the place without looking back. Meanwhile, Wendy, who was sleeping, a strange sound suddenly rang in her ears. So the next second, Wendy was awakened by that sound. She got off the platform and walked in the direction from which the sound came. At this time, Mike was still lying on the operating table. The doctor seemed to be taking something from him. After some operations, they actually cut off half of Mike's lung. then they inserted various tubes into it, and placed it in a special solution. To keep the lung active, Mike was put into a medical cabin. Luckily, his life wasn't in danger. In the laboratory on the other side, several alien eggs were put into a cabinet, then Curly opened the cabinet and carefully pushed out one alien egg, and placed it on the operating table. Then Curly turned on the camera, ready to record the whole experiment process. After recording the basic information of the alien egg, David personally picked up the scalpel and started cutting the alien egg. At the moment he made the cut, the sound in Wendy's ears suddenly grew louder. It seemed that something was calling her. Wendy accelerated towards the direction of the sound. At this time, David had already cut open the surface of the alien egg. He pulled his hands outward, and the facehugger inside the membrane was immediately revealed. This way, the facehugger was forcibly taken out. It was stunned by David on the operating table, like slaughtered fish and shrimp. Then David took out a special scalpel resistant to strong acid corrosion, and cut open the facehugger's body. At this time, Wendy also arrived at the door of the operating room. Suddenly, the alien egg made a sound representing fear, which made Wendy even more headache. When Wendy managed to walk into the operating room, David was taking out the alien embryo. Waves of sounds kept attacking Wendy. Finally, her eyes rolled back and she fainted to the ground, and the alien embryo was put by David into the culture tank containing Mike's lung. It immediately burrowed into the lung tissue. When Wendy finally opens her eyes again, she immediately sees David and the female researcher, but she can see people, yet hear no sound. It turns out the male researcher had disabled Wendy's hearing function. At this point, David mentions that when Wendy landed at the wreckage of the crashed spaceship earlier, she had talked about hearing a voice in her ears, and the closer she got to the alien, the louder the voice became. Last night, when he was extracting the embryo in the laboratory, Wendy's reaction further confirmed this. The female researcher asks if he suspects it has something to do with those creatures. David shakes his head. It's not those creatures, but only the alien eggs. But just as they are deeply engaged in their discussion, Boy, the boss, suddenly arrives with the human hybrid Curly. He's very curious about Wendy's behavior last night, so he comes to check on the situation in person. David is just about to gently advise Boy not to be too aggressive, but Boy interrupts him, saying David hasn't finished his experiment yet. David has to turn around and leave. Then Boy also tells the female researcher to go out. Soon, only Boy, Curly, Wendy, the male researcher Tom, and Mike, who Boy has called over, remain in the room.
How's the new lung? It's great. Thanks. You'll never guess what we did with the old one. What?
I can't hear you.
Wendy complains to her brother, saying there was a voice in the laboratory earlier that made her head hurt a lot. Mike immediately asks the others what kind of things are in the laboratory. Looking at the hesitant expressions of the people opposite him, Mike immediately realizes they have brought those alien creatures back to the laboratory. Instead of answering the question, Boy changes the subject and tells Tom to gradually turn on Wendy's hearing settings. Finally, Wendy can hear some sounds in her ears. Then she tells everyone what happened last night. At that time, Wendy was woken up by a kind of sound. That sound was just like the noise made by multi-legged insects rubbing their legs. After that, Wendy followed the sound to the door of the laboratory, and saw David conducting experiments on those eggs. But the one making the sound wasn't the alien eggs, it was the primitive embryo that David had taken out. It was the embryo that kept letting out screams. But Wendy felt that it was actually trying to communicate with her. Upon hearing this, Boy immediately becomes interested, and tells Wendy to try again on the spot, so Tom has to increase the frequency range of the sounds Wendy can hear. When he adjusts it to the highest frequency, Wendy indeed hears that sound again. Boy immediately steps forward excitedly, and asks Wendy if she can try to simulate that sound at a frequency audible to humans. With Wendy's physical abilities, she's completely capable of doing this. Boy tells Wendy to imagine herself as a loudspeaker. Wendy compliantly concentrates and tries. Everyone has different expressions on their faces. Boy, but excitedly says to Curly, who's trying to gain his favor, your self-taught French is nowhere near as impressive as this. Mike feels the atmosphere is a bit strange, so he quickly tells Boy that Wendy needs rest, but Boy points out that the lithium-ion battery in Wendy's body can power a small town. She doesn't need rest at all. It's Tom who steps in to defuse the situation in time, allowing Boy to let Wendy and her brother leave. But after everyone goes out, Boy's Expression turns solemn, obviously. Judging from the sound just now, Wendy and the alien egg were actually communicating with each other.
Are you sure you wouldn't like to return them to Yutani and get back to the work at hand?
So I can wake up one day with a xenomorph in my belly? No, thank you.
After a moment of thought, Boy gives an order. Mike must be kept on Dream Island. Unaware of this, Mike has already followed his sister to her room. The walls are covered with Wendy's paintings. After going through such a great change, there's still some awkwardness between the siblings when they are together. Suddenly, Mike takes the initiative to say that he isn't angry about Wendy's leaving. What makes him angry are the people from Genius Company. When Wendy was seriously ill and hospitalized, they wouldn't let Mike's father see her. Plus, Mike was trapped on the other side of the earth due to the war. This is how things ended up like this today. But luckily, they still have the chance to see each other again. As dusk falls, Boy once again picks up the broadcast loudspeaker and recites a passage from the book Peter Pan. Yet the figure that appears in the scene is Charlie. John's words keep echoing in his mind. When is a machine no longer a machine? It's exactly this sentence that confuses the young-minded Charlie, because in Charlie's view, he's still a human being with autonomy. He has just switched to a different body, but now John has pointed out that the hybrid boy is no longer human. Instead, he has become Boss Boy's personal property. It's worth noting that David has been secretly watching Charlie, as if he has some plan in mind. During this period, John would come to chat with the lonely Charlie every day, acting like a friend. Gradually, the two become very good friends. Seeing that the time is right, John finally can't help but reveal his real purpose. He asks Charlie to help him get one monster egg. Upon hearing that he's being asked to steal something, Charlie hurries to refuse, but John says, "How can retrieving stolen goods taken by a thief be considered stealing?"
If you want to do the moral thing, you'll help me get back what you stole. Think of it as restitution.
Besides, John specifically reminds Charlie that he mustn't mention this matter to anyone, otherwise, that would be betraying a friend. To further deepen their trust, John also asks about Charlie's original name from before, then uses that name to address him. Watching Charlie fall into his trap step by step, John once again breaks into a smile of success, having achieved his scheme. But when Charlie happily goes back to his bedroom, he's shocked to see David standing. Inside, David asks him, "Do you know what these three monkeys on the wall mean?" Before Charlie can answer, David takes the initiative to explain. They are respectively the see no evil monkey, the hear no evil monkey, and the speak no evil monkey. It turns out they are symbols in Buddhist teachings, representing the avoidance of evil thoughts and deeds, but after being passed down for many years, their meanings have gradually changed. Having said this, David suddenly asks, "Charlie, if I did something bad, would you stop me or turn a blind eye?"
I would stand up for my friends. Good.
Then David turns around and leaves. It always feels like David is quietly pushing the waves and aiding the currents. Later, David goes to the laboratory again to assist Boy in conducting an experiment on the octopus monster. This time, a lamb is to be sacrificed. Soon, the octopus monster is released. After locking onto its target, it immediately launches an attack on the lamb. Everyone holds their breath in anticipation. They watch with their own eyes as it digs out the lamb's left eye, then squeezes its own body into the eye socket. When the lamb stands up again, its body is completely controlled by the octopus monster. Its brain waves also change accordingly. The appearance of gamma waves proves that the octopus monster is a very intelligent creature. David tries to move his body to observe the parasitized lamb's reaction, but this action immediately annoys Boy. "How dare you, a man-made cyborg, overstep your bounds?" So Boy deliberately throws something to draw the lamb's attention to himself. A hint of gloom flashes across David's face, but he quickly hides it. At night, Mary the human hybrid falls into an identity crisis. After being attacked by the octopus monster, she stands in front of the mirror in her room, staring blankly at this adult body she inhabits. The octopus monster controls its host through parasitism, while she has uploaded her consciousness into this body. So what difference is there between her and the octopus monster? Is she still considered human? The next day, the surveillance footage shows Tom calling the female researcher out to talk. He thinks Boy is becoming more and more insane, abandoning the second phase tests on human hybrids, and instead focusing on researching alien creatures.
And if we did this wrong, best case, we got a bunch of AIs running around thinking that they're human. Worst case, we killed 6 kids.
But the female researcher tells her husband Tom to relax. They would never handle such a matter recklessly. But the next second, Mary, who has been thinking all night, runs over excitedly to tell the two that she's pregnant. Tom is stunned on the spot. "How can you, a machine, get pregnant and have a baby?" Upon hearing this, Mary immediately gets upset. She insists she isn't a machine but a human being. What is in her belly isn't an artificial object controlling her, but a newly conceived baby. The female researcher has to take her back. to the psychological counseling room to talk, trying to teach her knowledge about human reproduction, but Mary resists this strongly, saying her family used to run a farm. Of course she knows how to give birth to offspring. The female researcher then takes out a diagram of the lost boy's body structure, but Mary kicks it away the next second.
Those creatures can't hurt you. You know that, right? They're all locked up. I said stop!
The female researcher quickly tells Mary to calm down, which prevents her from suffering any actual harm. After that, she quietly presses a button under the table. Cyborg security guards rush to the psychological counseling room immediately. The female researcher tells them to take Mary back to her room and lock the door. She also informs the security supervisor that a level 3 incident has just occurred. On the other side, Mike is asked to talk alone by Jack. The purpose is to have him stay and work on Dream Island, helping the company confirm whether it's Marcy's consciousness that has successfully transferred into the synthetic body, or if the synthetic body has developed self-awareness after absorbing Marcy's memories. At first, Mike is unwilling and asks when he can take his sister away, but Jack tells Mike bluntly, "Your sister is no longer your sister. She's now the company's private property, and can never go home with you again." And most insidiously, the half-lung transplanted into Mike isn't free. If Mike insists on resigning and leaving, he will not only lose all contact with his sister, but also be stuck with a sky-high bill that will follow him home. Now Mike has no right to choose. He has to stay on Dream Island. Moreover, the other members of Mike's team have also been specially transferred to Dream Island by Boy. Seeing that Mike has been persuaded, Boy immediately calls Wendy over. He asks her if she wants her brother to stay on Dream Island, so that the siblings can truly be reunited. Naturally, Wendy wants this. Boy takes advantage of this and deliberately says, "No one else can see their family members. Why should you have special privileges?" Wendy's expression immediately falls. When Boy sees the time is right, he says, "But if you help me figure out what the alien creatures are saying, your brother Mike can stay." Wendy quickly nods in agreement, afraid that Boy might go back on his word. She even hurries to make a pinky promise with Boy. Unexpectedly, both of them, brother and sister, are tricked by Boy. Meanwhile, David takes the human hybrid George to stay in the laboratory. George suddenly has an idea, and asks David if he can change his name. He wants a real adult name. Ordinarily, such a matter can only be decided by Boy, but David makes his own decision and agrees, so George gets a new name, Ike. Shortly after, Charlie walks to the door of the laboratory, but before he can find out more information, he bumps into Ike, who's coming out. Ike asks if he wants to go play a game, but Charlie stutters and lies, saying he's going for a walk, then leaves without looking back. But as soon as he leaves, David starts monitoring Charlie. At this point, Charlie takes the initiative to contact John and says that access to the laboratory is quite strict. He can't get an alien egg out by himself.
Can't or won't.
My friends.
So won't.
But John has long guessed this, and prepares a backup plan in advance. At this point, he's at Charlie's home, and Charlie's mother is right beside him, but due to the special nature of the communication device, she can't hear her son's voice. Seeing that his friend's original plan won't work, John threatens Charlie with his family's lives, forcing him to steal the alien egg and hand it over to himself. Charlie has to agree compliantly, but he really can't pull this off alone. John lets out a soft laugh, then teaches Charlie a method. There's no need to steal the egg, he just needs to quietly bring a human into the laboratory, and let the human get close to the egg. At that point, the egg will automatically activate and hatch on its own, then something will come out, and attach itself to the human's face. Charlie just needs to find a place to lock up the unconscious human. After a day or two, the thing attached to the face will fall off, and Charlie just needs to hand that person over to John.
What happens to the person I choose?
Well, they'll have a bad couple of days, for sure. But I'll make sure they're comfortable.
Charlie really has no other options, so he has to agree to John's request. Within 24 hours, find a human, take them to the laboratory, and steal the egg, but neither of them knows that their whole conversation is being clearly monitored by David. But instead of reporting this, David even locks Charlie's brain monitoring device. Later, David walks into the cabinet where the alien egg is kept, and reaches out to gently touch the egg. On the other side, Mike is playing a game with several human hybrids. They are having a good time when Charlie arrives. But the first thing he sees is someone who annoys him, Wendy's brother. Why is it that they aren't even allowed to let their family know they exist, while Wendy can stay with her biological brother? A strong sense of jealousy suddenly wells up in Charlie's heart. If that's the case, then don't blame me for being ruthless. I just happen to be short of a candidate for this egg-stealing plan. Wendy, who's so focused on the experiment to keep her brother here, has no idea that her brother has already been targeted. Later, Wendy walks over to the container holding Mike's half-lung, and makes that unique sound with her mouth, trying to call out the primitive embryo hidden inside, and David stands outside, watching silently. The next second, the lung in the tank starts to twitch and stir, as if something is about to break out of it. At this point, the primitive embryo has hatched into a chestburster, but it doesn't attack Wendy. Instead, it keeps making calling sounds to Wendy, as if trying to communicate with her. Wendy, sensing something, leans forward and stretches out her hand, and the chestburster actually lets her touch its head compliantly. Shock flashes in David's eyes as he sees the whole process. What secret does Wendy hold that allows her to get along harmoniously with the chestburster before the spaceship crashed? At this time, they were only 17 days away from going back to Earth. John, who was asleep, was suddenly woken up by a crew member. John was very confused. Why was he woken up early, when it wasn't time for his shift yet? Amid the continuous alarm sounds ringing inside the spaceship, the crew member hurriedly told John that something terrible had happened. Earlier, a fire had broken out in the alien creature containment chamber. Although the fire was successfully put out, the bad news was that 2 creatures had escaped. They had latched onto the captain's and another crew member's faces. In the process, improper handling had caused the captain to die. Suddenly, on the spot, the crew members didn't dare to move anymore, so they hurried to wake up John, the security chief. John frowned as he listened and hurried toward the medical bay, but Charlie seemed completely unaware of how terrible the situation on the spaceship was now. He even started gossiping with John, saying, "While you were asleep these 8 months, the first mate and a male crew member got together." John ignored his nonsense the whole time, and walked straight into the medical bay, but the scene in front of him really exceeded John's expectations. On the hospital beds lay 2 crew members, who had been attacked by facehuggers. Scott hurriedly explained that he had tried to remove the alien creatures at the time, but the creature's tail had wrapped around the captain's throat, so he had used a knife to cut the base of the tail. He hadn't expected that. The alien creature's body contained strong acid, and that was how the captain died. John then asked, how? The fire in the containment chamber had started. Researcher Kate said that after the fire broke out, the captain and a male crew member had run in to put it out. It was feared that 2 containment pods had been opened, which was why the 2 of them had been attacked by facehuggers. After listening, John's expression turned even darker, as he asked what had caused the fire. Unexpectedly, everyone had no idea about it. John forcibly suppressed his anger, and quickly assigned tasks together. With the first mate, he told Kate to take people to the containment chamber, to check if anything else had escaped. The others were to carry the male crew member, who had been attached by the facehugger, to the cryogenic pod, and guard him there, because according to the company's regulations, any crew member who had come into contact with alien lifeforms must get into cryogenic sleep until the end of the voyage. Later, the first mate asked John to come to the bridge to talk, but just as he reached the door, the senior maintenance worker reminded him that the first mate had hidden a critical detail. The fire had damaged the navigation system and engine relays. This spaceship had become a giant missile, and it was now flying straight toward Earth. After listening, John felt even more that there was something wrong with this whole thing. How could it be such a coincidence? So after John arrived at the bridge, he asked the first mate, "Do you think this was an oversight or someone's vandalizing?" After all, the AI computer system performs regular system checks, and the engineers also conduct pressure tests. Yet a fire suddenly broke out in an unoccupied containment chamber, and it just so happened to burn the panels that control navigation and speed. John thought this matter was very suspicious. Unexpectedly, the first mate didn't take it seriously, and thought it might be an equipment malfunction. But John couldn't accept that. He demanded that the first mate issue an order to enter an emergency state, so that he could start a formal investigation. The first mate refused immediately upon hearing this. She was worried that this action would cause panic among the crew. It would be better to leave the matter to the AI computer system to resolve.
You are Bronsky.
What do you...
Company policy forbids romantic relationship between crew members.
The first mate was instantly flustered. John used this matter as leverage to force her to issue an order to enter an emergency state. The first mate still tried to refuse, on the grounds of the crew's safety, but John didn't take it seriously at all, because the order Tango Company had given him was to transport the cargo back to Earth intact. John didn't bother to care about anything else. Helplessly, the first mate had to order the ship to enter an emergency state. On the other side, Kate took Charlie to the containment chamber. Luckily, apart from the 2 facehuggers, nothing else had escaped for the time being. Soon after, the male crew member was also sent to the cryogenic pod to be frozen, but at this point, Jack approached a female crew member in cryosleep, and behaved in a very lewd manner. When Scott saw this, he quickly spoke up to stop Jack, preventing him from continuing to leer at his colleague. John was investigating inside the containment chamber. He found obvious signs that the hatch holding the xenomorph eggs had been manually opened. Then John squatted down and threw a cigarette into the opened hole. It was clear that someone had sneaked into the containment chamber, set a fire, and at the same time, deliberately opened the cabinet door holding the xenomorph eggs. This meant there was a mole among the crew. John immediately retrieved the containment chamber's surveillance footage and began to carefully examine it frame by frame. The footage showed that after the fire broke out, the captain and the male crew member hurried over to put it out. The facehuggers sensed someone approaching and immediately launched an attack on the two, and just like that, the two unlucky ones were both attacked by the facehuggers. John tapped his fingers on the keyboard. He adjusted the surveillance time backward, and finally found a figure sneaking to open the cabinet door, but since the figure was always facing away from the camera, their identity couldn't be identified. But John could finally confirm that this crisis was man-made. Next, all he needed to do was identify the suspect. Later, John went to the spaceship's maintenance workers and asked them for the blueprints. John needed to know all the pipeline spaces and access points. The mole had gone undetected for so long, so they must have been taking paths the others usually couldn't see. The young, inexperienced maintenance worker turned pale with fear. As soon as he heard that someone on the ship was secretly vandalizing it, John stepped forward and threatened the two that they mustn't leak the news until the mole was found. Otherwise, all their personal dividends would be confiscated. After that, John took the blueprints back to the control room to study them. At this time, the first mate went to the cockpit and spoke to the AI computer system. The first mate applied to the system for permission to destroy the cargo if the crew's safety was threatened, but her request was ruthlessly rejected by the AI computer system. If the first mate dared to disobey the order, command authority would be transferred to John. The first mate had no choice but to accept it angrily. John took out the letter his daughter had written to him. A surge of endless longing welled up in his heart. But in fact, in the 8th year of John's mission, his daughter had died in a fire. The father and daughter would never have the chance to see each other again. John slowly folded the letter and placed it in a box, specially used for keeping mementos. But just as John closed his eyes to rest, the spaceship was damaged by the mole once again. The few who were startled awake hurried to gather. The senior maintenance worker told everyone that the saboteur knows the ship's structure like the back of his hand. Now the fuel reserves are down to just 8%. Within 24 hours, the ship will go from being a missile to a fired arrow. Before the group could calm down, another alarm went off on the ship, this time for the cryogenic pod's isolation failure. John rushed to the cryogenic pod at once. He found the male crew member had a huge hole in his abdomen, but the alien creature was nowhere to be found. It was clearly scurrying around the ship. John immediately got ready to capture the creature. He didn't forget to remind the first mate that they mustn't kill the alien creature. They had to capture it alive. On the other side, Kate knew nothing about this. She was focused on the research experiment she was conducting. The subjects were those several blood-sucking creatures, but the octopus-eyed creature nearby was quietly observing and learning, and Kate's careless work style also foreshadowed her own death. A blood-sucking creature climbed to the top of the container. While she wasn't looking, the octopus-eyed creature immediately noticed this, and kindly tapped on the glass to warn Kate, but Kate couldn't understand what the octopus-eyed creature meant, and even turned around and put it back. After climbing out of the container, the blood-sucking creature headed straight for Kate's water cup, and laid a large number of eggs in it. When Scott walked in, the blood-sucking creature had already climbed into a slice of bread. Both of them were shocked. Scott hurriedly caught it and put it back into the container. He asked Kate if she had forgotten to cover the top device, but Kate refused to admit it. Later, urged by Scott, she took her water cup and prepared to go to the dining hall for the gathering, having no idea that the water cup in her hand had already become a deadly weapon. As soon as Kate left the laboratory, the octopus-eyed creature immediately started its escape plan. First, it used two of its tentacles to suck onto the glass wall, then it kept gathering strength to hit the tank. Finally, the container was knocked to the ground, and the octopus-eyed creature regained its freedom. At the same time, all the awakened people on the ship were called to the dining hall by the first mate for a meeting. With a solemn expression, the first mate told everyone that the alien creature inside the male crew member had already hatched, and now no one knew where it had gone. The first mate ordered a full search of the ship to capture the creature as soon as possible. At this point, the young maintenance worker was still chatting gossip, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. The first mate was very angry, but could do nothing about his rascal attitude. At this time, there were already many small black blood-sucking creatures wriggling around in Kate's cup, but the young maintenance worker picked it up and drank from it without even looking. At this point, John slammed his hand on the table and told everyone to take it seriously, otherwise they would all die on this ship. Then John told everyone to hand over their duty schedules and activity logs to him within an hour. He planned to screen them one by one and interview the off-duty personnel, determined to find the troublemaker.
No one else gets a gun until I'm confident.
But John also emphasized that anyone who could provide information about the suspect would have their profit share ratio increased. After saying this, John ignored everyone's protests, immediately turned and left the dining hall, and began interviewing the crew members. In the process, he discovered that Scott would secretly sneak out to take the banned drugs from the medical bay, and also found out that Jack would take the opportunity to go to the cryogenic pod to molest the sleeping female crew members. Unluckily, neither of these two was the mastermind behind the destruction of the spaceship, but Jack did know some information. Hoping to get a higher share of the profit, he reminded John that although the computer showed the cryogenic pods were full, it didn't mean they had always been full. John immediately realized what this meant. On the other side, the senior maintenance worker continued working with his apprentice. At this point, the young maintenance worker was still daydreaming about how he would enjoy himself after collecting the money when they went back to Earth. But the senior maintenance worker pierced his dream with one sentence, saying, "Tango Company isn't paying wages, they're just buying 65 years of our lives, with a single share of the profit. This matter is far from being so wonderful. After 65 years, when we go back to Earth, everything will have changed beyond recognition." But just at this point, the young maintenance worker suddenly felt severe pain in his abdomen, and then vomited a large amount of blood. The senior maintenance worker was so frightened that he quickly called for someone to come and save him. On the other side, Kate and the first mate went back to the laboratory, only to find the room in a mess. Kate immediately realized that the octopus-eyed creature had escaped. The next second, the lights in the room suddenly went out. The two didn't dare to stay any longer, and quickly stepped back. But the octopus-eyed creature, which had been hiding in the dark, followed them as they moved. At the same time, after some effort, John successfully restored the communication records of everyone on the spaceship. Then he began to check them one by one, and finally found the mastermind behind the destruction of the spaceship. It turned out to be the chief designer of the spaceship, and the person in contact with the chief designer was none other than Boy, the boss of Genius Company. It turned out that this had been Boy's plan all along, with the goal of obtaining those 5 types of alien creatures. Boy had ordered the chief designer to destroy the spaceship, so that it would crash in his own territory, and the exchange condition was that Boy would upload the chief engineer's consciousness into a synthetic human body, allowing him to become an immortal being. But those who have watched the previous episodes know that currently only children's consciousness can be transferred. Obviously, Boy must have deceived the chief engineer here. After watching the video, John quickly took his gun and rushed to the cryogenic pod to confirm. As expected, the chief engineer's cryogenic pod was empty. Just at this point, another alarm went off on the spaceship, warning of the failed containment in Medical Bay 1. John quickly rushed over to check and told the first mate about the mole. At this time, the young maintenance worker was undergoing an examination in the medical bay. After Kate and Scott scanned him with the equipment, they found multiple wriggling black spots on his digestive tract. The two decided to immediately perform an abdominal incision to stop the bleeding. John originally disagreed, fearing that contaminants might leak out, but the first mate was anxious to save the man and supported the two in performing the surgery immediately. In this way, Kate and Scott made an incision in the young maintenance worker's abdomen and unexpectedly saw 6 small blood-sucking creatures that had already taken shape.
We need to seal that room.
I'm gonna try to remove one. No!
Nobody asked you.
They're suffering too much blood.
I always feel like there are basically no normal people on this ship except John. Scott didn't listen to John's dissuasion at all. He picked up the forceps and pushed them forward. The next second, the small blood-sucking creatures released a cloud of deadly poison. Unprepared, Kate and Scott immediately inhaled it through their noses. John held back the senior maintenance worker, who tried to rush in to save people. The first mate, on the other hand, activated the jet disinfection device. After the smoke cleared, all 3 people inside the room were dead. But the bad news didn't end there. A crew member hurried over to inform John that Jack had been killed by something unknown. In fact, he had been taken away by a xenomorph that had matured secretly. After thinking for a moment, John took over the first mate's command authority and ordered all the living crew members to take shelter on the bridge, because the ship had enough fuel to enter Earth's geosynchronous orbit, and now they just needed to find a way to adjust the orbit. So John asked the male crew member to go with him to the engine room to transfer all functions to the bridge, while the first mate and the senior maintenance worker were in charge of waking up the remaining crew members. But the first mate's ability to withstand stress was worrying, and she still hadn't pulled herself together by then. John didn't have time to comfort her. Instead, he immediately took the man and rushed to the engine room, but on the way, the chief engineer, who had been lying in wait for a long time, suddenly jumped out to ambush the two. Unluckily, the male crew member took a bullet. John fought while activating the hatch next to him, and dragged the injured male crew member into the cabin. Coincidentally, the octopus-eyed creature was inside, and now it was finally set free. Immediately after, the chief engineer ambushed again, and shot through the male crew member's head with a single bullet, but he himself was also injured by John. Later, John produced a blade from his hand, and stabbed through the chief engineer's body with one strike, but the dying chief engineer said that John could no longer stop it. On the other side, the first mate sadly poured the soil from earth outside the cabin, but the next second, the mature xenomorph suddenly darted out, probably wanting to use the first mate to incubate its eggs. The first mate was so frightened that she ran away at once. The xenomorph chased after her relentlessly. In the nick of time, the first mate held her breath and hid around the corner. Then, taking advantage of the xenomorph's inattention, she hurriedly escaped through another path. Finally, before being caught, she managed to block the xenomorph outside the cabin door. The first mate welded the cabin door shut, while calling for the senior maintenance worker, only to find that he was standing motionless in place. As he slowly turned around, a chill crawled up the first mate's spine. Now the first mate was in big trouble. When the xenomorph found it couldn't scratch open the door, it immediately climbed away along the ceiling. The next second, John took a shortcut and hurried over, but as soon as he opened the hatch, he saw the unconscious first mate who had been choked. Zevary was exactly the senior researcher's name. This octopus-eyed creature had an incredibly strong learning ability. Right after that, the xenomorph also came over to join in the fray. When John noticed this, he hurriedly slipped away, letting them face off against each other. The octopus-eyed creature immediately took control of this human body, then leaped and mounted the xenomorph. The two immediately started a fierce brawl. Judging from this situation, if the octopus-eyed creature is given a strong enough body, it could really easily subdue the xenomorph. The xenomorph waved its tail and stabbed the human body several times. Only then did it fling the octopus-eyed creature off itself. Just at this point, the first mate was woken up by the sound of the fight. She quickly took the chance to sneak away, then hurried to the outside of the cockpit. Seeing John already inside talking to the system, the first mate called for him to let her in quickly, for the xenomorph would be coming back to kill them at any time. But after hesitating for a moment, John used a welding torch to weld the hatch shut. Even though the first mate kept cursing him, it was to no avail. Soon, the first mate was captured and killed by the xenomorph. John, but finished dealing with the system, and hid in the shockproof compartment before the xenomorph could get in. Yet the liquid sprayed from the xenomorph's mouth still splashed onto John's face. As John put on his mask, the spaceship also began to crash. This is the whole process before the spaceship crashed. Now John had returned to Wayland Tango headquarters, and reported all the above matters truthfully to the boss. John made a promise in front of the female boss that he would definitely bring the cargo back and kill Boy, the one who started all this, but the female boss told John that she would meet with Boy the next day.
Maybe the lawyers can fix this.
Unless lawyers mean soldiers, we're gonna have to do this my way.
In order to keep her brother, Wendy promised Boy that she would figure out what the alien was saying, so whenever she had free time, she stayed in the closed laboratory and communicated with the alien, which was growing larger and larger. Surprisingly, the human and the alien got along very well. The octopus-eyed monster, on the other hand, watched quietly from a distance, as if waiting for a certain opportunity. Outside the laboratory, Mike looked at all this, and still felt a little worried about his sister's safety, so he asked David, the bio-android beside him, "Is my sister really safe in there?" David replied in a calm tone that the one inside was much smaller than the one Wendy had killed. Moreover, there was an 8-centimeter steel-reinforced glass blocking it, so nothing would happen. But Mike still frowned and asked what precautions should be taken when maintaining the mixed-blood beings. It turned out that Mike still hadn't completely given up. He wanted to find a way to quietly take his sister away to live a normal life.
Your sister has potential to invent faster than light travel and explore the stars for thousands of years. And you want her to be a family?
She's just a kid.
Keep telling yourself that.
But the hybrid Mary had suffered from identity disturbance ever since she met with the octopus-eyed monster. To numb herself, she even developed the delusion that she was pregnant. The female researcher originally wanted to correct this wrong notion, but it triggered Mary's emotional outburst, and she almost lost her life at Mary's hands. Left with no other choice, she had to shut Mary down temporarily. After scanning and inspection, it turned out that the problem wasn't with the synthetic body, but with Mary's own consciousness. When she was still a human child, she was very emotional. Although the female researcher had made adjustments in this regard, they were clearly insufficient. The female researcher wanted to continue debugging, but Jack issued an order to erase all of Mary's memories after going to the tower. Then, reduce her response to stimuli and slow down her processing speed, and that would solve the problem at its root. But researcher Tom was unwilling to change Mary's personality in this way. He was afraid that this wrong method would only make the situation worse. But Jack gave the two no right to choose, because in 3 weeks, the Lost Boys would appear on the exhibition stage and chat casually with the rest of the top 5. Therefore, Jack couldn't allow any mistakes to happen. After hearing this, Tom still opposed doing this. Unexpectedly, his wife agreed and even said she could complete the task independently. Just as Tom was very shocked, Jack actually fired him and handed over all subsequent work to his wife.
If you're still on the island at the end of the day, you'll be trespassing. And you may be shot.
After saying that, Jack left straight away, leaving the husband and wife staring at each other in silence. On the other side, after Wendy finished today's communication experiment, she met her brother who had been waiting for a long time. As soon as she walked out, Wendy was obviously very emotionally excited about being able to communicate with the alien. Mike had to gently tell her that bringing the alien creature here was a huge mistake. If something went wrong, the consequences would be unimaginable. Unexpectedly, Wendy answered from the alien creature's perspective. She said they didn't come here voluntarily, and added that they were no different from humans.
It tried to kill us.
Not this one. Joe, I think this one could be good.
Marcy.
This is a yes place, not a no place.
As soon as Mike heard this, he immediately pressed for an explanation of what couldn't refuse meant. Only then did he learn that on Genius Island, all orders could only be obeyed, because Boy said that refusal would leave people achieving nothing. Mike immediately realized, wasn't this brainwashing? He wanted to instill correct ideas in his sister, but Wendy clearly refused to accept them, and even said she didn't want to leave Neverland. Mike had to avoid these topics for the time being. At the same time, in the presence of an arbitration lawyer sent by the top 5 governance team, Boy and Yutani sat down at the negotiation table. John and David also met again. According to the agreement between the various enterprises, after the lawyer heard the evidence and arguments, the decision he made would be legally binding. It was just that Boy clearly showed no respect for Yutani, and even put his feet on the table. Since the items were still in the other person's hands, Yutani could only frown and hold back. After the hearing officially started, Yutani put forward her demands. The Maginot Scientific Research spaceship was the property of her company, therefore, the items on it should rightfully be taken over by her. As for the damage caused to Genius City, she was willing to bear the excessive repair costs and compensation. In the middle of her speech, Boy not only kept interrupting but also pointed out to the lawyer that there were 5 samples of deep space predatory creatures on the spaceship, and Weyland Yutani Company had violated about 50 intercompany laws by smuggling them to Earth. As he spoke, he even tried to show the photos of the creatures to the lawyer. When Yutani heard this, her expression darkened immediately, and she quickly stopped him. She then argued to the lawyer that according to the plan, the alien creatures were supposed to be sent to an extraterrestrial research institution for research. As long as Boy was willing to cooperate in handing them over, they would be sent there immediately. Then Yutani gritted her teeth and said she was willing to pay an additional 10 billion as compensation, but Boy mentioned 20 billion, and Yutani countered with 15 billion. Boy immediately said 25 billion with glee, so Yutani had to accept the 20 billion compensation. It's just that Yutani still underestimated Boy's cunning. Although he seemingly agreed to hand over the alien creatures, he demanded that they be quarantined for 6 weeks before being sent back. He also claimed this was strictly in accordance with the requirements of the alien quarantine protocol. Yutani wasn't foolish either. 6 weeks would be more than enough for Boy to thoroughly study all the secrets of these creatures, but she wasn't given a chance to object, and the matter was settled. Just like that, this made Yutani very angry. After all the outsiders had left, Yutani immediately asked John, "Are you confident about your plan?" John nodded slowly. He could get hold of 1 alien creature today. It's just that security on Neverland would definitely be tightened. John suggested that Yutani first destroy the facility's defense lines, then evacuate amid the chaos. Later, David seemed to have intentionally bumped into John in the elevator hall. They were at odds with each other right from the start. David mocked John for being a cyborg. John retorted that David was an outdated model and would soon be replaced by hybrids. The two exchanged words, and their argument grew more and more intense. John even said that when he killed androids, his favorite thing was that androids had no sense of pain. David, but smiled upon hearing this. He believed that only pain could bring a sense of satisfaction.
That moment when you realize you're not a machine after all, and the first eyeball pops.
Just then, the elevator door opened. Their argument came to an end right there. On the other side, at the Neverland base, Mary, whose memories had been erased, woke up on the bed in her room. Wendy, who had been standing by the bed, immediately asked her, "Did you really say you were going to have a baby?" But Mary, who had lost her memories, looked confused and said, "When did I say that?" Wendy felt something was wrong, so she immediately pressed for more details, only to find that Mary didn't even have the memory of going to the spaceship. Wendy's expression gradually turned serious. She realized that the matter was far more complicated than she had imagined. Mary's memories must have been manipulated by the researchers. Upon realizing this, Wendy immediately left Mary's room. At the same time, although Charlie had set his sights on Mike, he had never done anything bad before, and had no idea how to go about it. He increasingly felt the helplessness and fear of being forced to act like an adult. After a while, Mike was quietly drawing a route map to escape the island. At this point, Charlie got into the room without making a sound. It was obvious that he planned to trick Mike into going to the laboratory. John was directing Charlie on what to say via the communicator, but because he was too nervous, he stammered when telling the lie. It was obvious that something was wrong. Just as Mike was wondering what Charlie was up to, a team member came to ask Mike to go out on patrol. By this time, it was too late for Charlie to stop them. He could only watch as Mike went out on patrol with the team member. The three members of Mike's team patrolled the base in the rain. They were told that Yutani might send people to seize the aliens, which was why security at the base had been stepped up. As Mike walked, he quietly asked the two for information.
There's gotta be some way off, right?
Some airships, couple boats.
Are we close enough to the mainland for boats?
I don't know about that, but down this path and you'll see a sign for boat docks.
But before Mike could get more information, Lucy told him to give up his idea as soon as possible. She could tell that Mike was planning to escape, but it was already a blessing for them to stay alive and get paid on the island. Why was he still so stubborn? Although there were monsters on the island, staying there at least allowed them to know where the monsters were. On the other side, Wendy was communicating with the alien in the laboratory again. By this time, the alien had evolved into its complete form, but there were still no signs of it attacking Wendy. Meanwhile, Boy and David were still on the transport plane, heading back to the Neverland base. David suddenly contacted the hybrid Ike, saying that he couldn't go back to the island for the time being. He asked Ike to help feed the alien creatures in the laboratory, and find another creature for an experiment. Ike agreed happily and even lied that Curly wasn't around. His goal was to conduct the experiment alone. David reminded Ike to strictly follow the experimental regulations. Ike agreed verbally but didn't take it to heart. After hanging up the communication, Ike went to the laboratory alone. By this time, Wendy had already left, and the lamb parasitized by the octopus-eyed monster was watching his every move. In the end, the scene at the beginning of the story unfolded. At the same time, Wendy took the initiative to sit in the female researcher's psychological counseling room. As soon as the female researcher came back, Wendy questioned her about what she had done to Mary, why Mary had inexplicably lost a part of her memory. The female researcher froze for a moment, then lied that there was a problem with Mary's program. She had to remove the damaged data to prevent other parts of Mary from being damaged too. But as soon as the word damaged was spoken, Wendy's eyes sharpened. Because humans only get sick, and only machines can be damaged, Wendy stood up and approached the female researcher. She also said, "You didn't give Mary a choice, did you? You made the decision for her." The female researcher realized she had said the wrong thing, and quickly said that she had great respect for the Lost Boys. To break the awkward atmosphere, the female researcher quickly changed the subject.
You've been going to the secure lab a lot lately, Kirsch told me.
Someone has to watch. They didn't ask to come here.
Faced with Wendy's oppressive approach, the female researcher subconsciously began to step back, but Wendy continued. Boy treats alien creatures as test subjects, and researches them just like he researches the Lost Boys. Maybe in the eyes of researchers, there's no difference between the two at all. The female researcher had no way to refute for a moment. Wendy told her, "If humans are like this, then I don't want to be human anymore. Killing and dismembering creatures just to see what's inside them." And David once said that humans have romantic imaginations about things, so they develop emotions, but we Lost Boys don't need that. We can see the true face of the world, and not be swayed by emotions.
Well, he would say that. He's a machine. You have to tell me what's wrong so I can help you fix it.
In the end, their conversation ended on a bad note. On the other side, Tom was sadly packing his things. He had to leave the Neverland base before dark. At this point, Tom hadn't yet noticed in the surveillance that Ike had collapsed inside the storage cabinet. Just then, Mike came to consult Tom, because Mike had noticed earlier that Tom was different from the others. He didn't simply treat his sister like a machine, but he was surprised to learn that Tom had been fired. Nevertheless, Mike sincerely asked him if his sister was safe staying here. Upon hearing this, Tom immediately turned to look at the indoor surveillance camera. It was obvious that some things couldn't be said directly, so Tom said aloud that Neverland was very safe. He pretended to let Mike come to the screen to check the safety signal. In fact, he was telling Mike to take Wendy away quickly, and even wrote down the boat password. Then Tom turned off Wendy's tracker and monitor. This was the last thing he could do for the siblings, but after Mike left, Tom suddenly found that Ike's tracker had lost contact, and the last location of the signal was in the closed laboratory. Tom's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately realized something was wrong, so he hurried toward the laboratory. At this point, Charlie was right outside the laboratory. Now, the time specified by John was drawing closer and closer, but Charlie still hadn't succeeded. John, who was in the distance, immediately threatened him, "If you fail to get this done, you'll be left to collect your mother's body." Just as Charlie was sinking into despair, Tom hurried to the laboratory door. Due to the emergency and his impending departure, Tom immediately violated the laboratory rules and broke in as a human. Charlie thought to himself, "Here's the chance." Meanwhile, David on the transport plane looked at the surveillance screen and immediately understood Charlie's plan. Then Tom found the poor Ike. Overcome with compassion, he quickly opened the cabinet door and tried to pull Ike out. But the android's body was too heavy. Tom tried his best but still couldn't move Ike alone. Taking advantage of Tom's inattention, Charlie opened the cabinet door where the alien was sealed. An alien egg opened up immediately. By the time Tom saw the blooming alien egg, it was already too late, because Charlie had locked him inside the laboratory. Tom told Charlie to let him out quickly, but was refused. Only then did Tom realize he had been tricked. He quickly made a call to ask others for help. Charlie still felt a twinge of hesitation. He turned away with tears streaming down his face, until he could no longer hear the sounds of struggle at all. At this point, Boy on the transport plane was still excited about outsmarting Yutani, completely unaware that his own situation was also bad.
Everything okay?
Affirmative.
Charlie waited until the facehugger was mostly dormant. Before opening the laboratory door and stepping inside, he looked around and spotted an air vent not far away, so he immediately dragged Tom toward it. At this point, because the cabinet had been opened, the strange bug that had corroded Ike was set free. Luckily for Charlie, he managed to close the air vent cover at the last minute and avoided being attacked. Meanwhile, the lamb in the nearby cabinet watched the whole process, looking at the half-dead android body beside it. A strange glint flashed in the lamb's eye. Perhaps the long-awaited opportunity had finally arrived. After succeeding, Charlie hid Tom together with the facehugger in his own bedroom. After all, he was still a child mentally, so Charlie, who had done something bad, was extremely nervous. He huddled in the corner, constantly rubbing his hands. He stared blankly for a long time before remembering to give Tom some water to drink. Just as he was about to move his hand, the facehugger's tail quickly tightened around Tom's neck, making it impossible to give him water. At this moment, there was another knock on the door. Charlie panicked immediately and quickly pulled a table over Tom to cover him, but the hybrid Ian outside the door said, "Stop pretending. I know you're inside." Charlie was afraid that Ian's voice would attract others, so he had to let Ian in, and Ian immediately saw Tom's exposed arm. Thus, he also discovered the facehugger. Ian loudly questioned Charlie about what he was doing. Charlie could only explain that he was forced to do it. If he didn't do this, the people on the spaceship would kill his mother. He also begged Ian not to tell anyone about this.
Like, it's not gonna kill him.
No, that's what the man said. He said he just sees the monster. Once he has it, he let out the go.
The inexperienced Ian also believed Charlie's words, and out of their past friendship, he even agreed to help Charlie carry Tom to the beach by the sea, and so the two of them set out to do it. On the other side, the synthetic human David arrived at the laboratory door, and saw that Ike's body had been almost completely eaten by the giant flies. He frowned, first closing the door of the alien egg cabinet, then he arranged for other synthetic humans to go in and catch the escaped flies. Finally, they managed to get the laboratory under control. Once everything was safe, David allowed Boy to come in and check the situation. Then he explained from the side that this kind of alien fly digests food externally. They should live on planets where organic life is scarce. so their main diet consists of minerals. Ike was just unlucky enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Unfortunately, Genius Company has not yet developed the technology for restarting and restoring hybrids. Therefore, Ike's death was irreversible.
There goes that 6 billion. No more kids in the lab.
Except Wendy.
But immediately after that, David told Boy that this incident wasn't an accident. After saying that, he showed Boy the surveillance video. It was clearly the octopus-eyed monster that had planned everything, but the beneficiaries were the giant flies. Moreover, the octopus-eyed monster clearly knew the consequences of its actions. Boy developed a great interest in it, so he immediately made a request to David. He wanted to move the octopus-eyed monster away. Just as he finished speaking, Wendy arrived at the laboratory. She wanted to know what exactly had happened in the laboratory, but instead, she saw Ike's corpse on the table. David and Boy stopped her from getting any closer. Wendy said she would tell the others about this matter, but Boy told Wendy to think carefully again.
Kids feel like to get an idea in their head. Oh my god, we're not safe. And suddenly there's no talking to them.
We're not safe.
Upon hearing this, Wendy turned around immediately. When stopped, she directly drove the aliens to scare them. Only then did she leave the laboratory under Boy's shocked gaze. Realizing the urgency, Boy urgently asked David to track down the other hybrids, only to find that the hybrid tracking system had been deactivated. Boy was so angry that he swore. On the other side, Mike hurried to his sister's room. But before he could speak, Wendy said, "He's dead." Upon asking, he learned that it was Ike who had died. Seeing that his sister's mindset was wavering, Mike said that Tom had helped turn off the pursuit system, and they could take the opportunity to leave Neverland Base. But Wendy was thinking about taking the others with her. However, Charlie and Ian were not there at this time. Wendy only found Curly and Mary. She told the two of them the news of Ike's death, originally intending to persuade them to leave. But unexpectedly, she was accused by Curly, who said that if they hadn't gone to look for her brother, none of them would be in danger. At this time, Curly was still stubbornly under the illusion that Boy was a helpful philanthropist, so she firmly refused to leave with Wendy. However, she also promised not to report this to Boy. Wendy had to leave with Mary, but there was one more thing to do before leaving. Wendy operated the panel in the room, and unexpectedly opened the cage holding the mature aliens remotely. Boy, who had just left the laboratory, was lucky enough to escape with his life. He ran over to question the female researcher about where her husband, Tom, had gone. It turned out that Boy had already found out that Tom had not boarded the departing plane. Obviously, Tom must still be on the island. The female researcher was completely confused about this. She really had no idea about any of this. Just then, the base suddenly blared with the alarm for the damaged sealed laboratory. As soon as Boy heard it, he rushed out immediately. The scene shifts to Charlie's side. The two of them had just carried Tom to the corridor when they ran straight into David, but unexpectedly, not only did David not stop them, but he even took the initiative to tell them the correct escape route. What on earth is David trying to do? At the same time, Wendy and her group had already arrived in the dense forest. They planned to rush to the pier to take a boat and leave. As they walked, 6 graves suddenly appeared in front of them. It turned out that after the consciousness transfer surgery was completed, the children's original bodies were buried on the island. Each tombstone was also engraved with their previous names, just like an ordinary cemetery. Now, a question arises: if the children are already considered dead, then what should they be considered now that they have become hybrids?
It's not us. We're still here.
I don't think I am anymore.
Mike found that there were people patrolling around, so he quickly pulled himself out of his sorrow, called the two of them, and continued on their way. Wendy briefly recalled her past self, and only then left with her eyes filled with tears. On the other side, Charlie and Ian carried the person to the woods. To avoid the patrols, they hid Tom in the bushes. In the blink of an eye, they couldn't find Tom anymore.
What is that?
Fortunately, Tom seems to have lost a segment of memory. Otherwise, just based on the fact that Charlie deliberately locked him up, he would never have such a good attitude now. Charlie hurriedly deceived Tom, saying that there was a problem at the base. Everyone needed to evacuate as soon as possible. Tom's wife was waiting for him by the sea. Before Tom could fully process it, he was pushed by Charlie and Ian towards the sea. On the way, Tom kept recalling the memories before he passed out. After some attempts, he finally remembered. He seemed to have been attacked by something. Thus, Tom hurriedly spoke up to stop the two of them. Since there was a problem at the base, then they should all the more go back to find a solution. Charlie still tried to lie, claiming that they wanted to take Tom to find his wife. Tom directly exposed Charlie's lie. As children with immature minds, the two of them behaved far too nervously, and it was obvious at a glance that they were lying.
You're lying to me because you don't think I'll understand, but the thing is, us who love you, we will understand. You're gonna tell me what's going on, and I promise you, I'll help.
Ian felt somewhat ashamed and embarrassed by these words. He lifted his foot and was about to go back with Tom. Charlie saw that John hadn't come yet, so he had to think of another way. The next second, Tom fell to the ground in pain. Immediately after, a chestburster burst out violently from his chest. Charlie and Ian stepped back in fear. After that, the chestburster slipped into the forest to hide and grow secretly. Charlie couldn't catch up and could only watch as things fell short of success at the last step. Ian questioned Charlie about why he had lied to him. Didn't he say Tom was out of danger? But by this time, Charlie was also on the verge of an emotional breakdown. He stubbornly dragged Tom's body and continued moving forward. Ian really had no choice but to help Charlie drag the body together. After the two walked in silence for a while, they finally saw John, who had led a team to sneak in at the entrance of a cave.
Team 2, landfall, over.
Copy. Infiltrate.
Stay low. Shoot to kill. Over.
But as soon as John saw Tom's body, he knew the alien creature was no longer inside it. Charlie still tried to find excuses for his failure, but John didn't want to. Listen, he told Charlie that only children would be eager to defend themselves after messing things up. Adults would only admit their mistakes. Then he took the two of them and walked back. The scene shifts to the laboratory. Jack reported to Boyd that the mature aliens had escaped through the drainpipe, and there was no sign of Wendy either. Moreover, Jack didn't recommend moving the lamb. Decentralized management would only increase the difficulty of control, but Boyd said this creature was of great research value. He was eager to talk to it. As he spoke, Boyd walked up to the lamb and used a pen to write the first 3 digits of Pike 3.14 on his hand. He also explained the meaning of the numbers to the lamb in detail. Finally, Boy asked the lamb if it knew what the next 3 digits were. The octopus-eyed monster controlled the lamb to lift its hoof and tap on the ground. It tapped once, then 5 times, and finally bleated 9 times. Boy became extremely excited. He thought it was a great pity that the creature couldn't speak, so Boy made a bold decision. He wanted to replace the octopus-eyed monster's body, replace it with a body that could communicate with him through language. Jack was just about to find a low-level cleaner for the body. Boy suddenly remembered something. He had a more suitable choice. On the other side, Wendy and her group were only 400 meters away from the pier, but the next second, many people suddenly emerged from around them. They were Tangu's second team, who had sneaked in at the same time as John. Wendy warned them to leave quickly, but the other side didn't listen. Mike told his sister not to act impulsively, but immediately after, Wendy summoned the aliens that had been hiding nearby. The aliens went on a killing spree, and screams echoed one after another. Mike couldn't bear to watch, but Mary watched with great interest. After the battle ended, the aliens crawled over to Wendy. Wendy pushed aside her brother, who was trying to stop her, then reached out and touched the alien. The alien lowered its head gently and let Wendy stroke it. After that, Wendy issued an order again. The aliens immediately turned around and slipped into the dense forest. Mike felt uncomfortable in his heart when he saw the bodies of human companions scattered everywhere. He even began to feel a little afraid of his sister. Then he picked up a weapon and caught up with Wendy. On the other side, the chestburster hadn't run far before it was trapped by a specially made net. The scene shifts to John's side. He led his team to sneak into the interior of the base building step by step. Before they could do anything, a large group of enemies emerged from inside. In just a moment, they surrounded the group. John immediately thought that Charlie had betrayed him, but soon David walked quickly up to John. He was still holding the chestburster he had just captured. It was obvious that David had been playing a long game to catch a big fish earlier.
Finders keepers. Boys, get over here.
Charlie and Ian hurriedly returned to David's side. John and his men were locked up. At the same time, Wendy, Mike, and Mary arrived at the pier on foot. Right in front of them was the ship Tom had mentioned. As long as they set sail, the group would gain their freedom. Mike told his sister to untie the ship's mooring ropes, while he turned around to check if there was anything unusual in the cabin, only to unexpectedly run straight into the team members lying in ambush here. There were also many guards on the shore. Mike immediately realized that his comrade had betrayed him and brought people here to lie in wait.
We're never going back.
Off the boat. Now!
I see you.
A fight broke out between the two sides immediately. Wendy stopped the woman with dreadlocks who was about to shoot Mary, but Mike saw Mary kill another human being once again. Seeing that Wendy was about to summon the aliens again, Mike quickly stepped forward to stop his sister. The former comrade, the woman with dreadlocks, fell into Mary's hands. At this critical moment, Mike had to shoot and knock down Mary, who was about to commit violence, but this action aroused Wendy's dissatisfaction. It seemed that a rift was about to appear in the trust between the siblings. Now, a circle of people surrounded Wendy. While the alien was hiding not far away, it would rush out and go on a killing spree as soon as Wendy gave the order. Under the order of Boy, the boss of Genius Company, all employees of the Genius Force stationed on the island began to patrol the dense forest and search for mature aliens. Meanwhile, the female researcher, who knew nothing about this, came to the graves of the 6 children with flowers as usual, but something was quietly approaching from behind her. When the female researcher turned around, she was shocked to see a drooling alien. At this critical moment, Mike's former teammates arrived just in time, drove the alien away, and saved the female researcher. But in reality, the situation was far from optimistic. The guards were helpless against the mature aliens. Their numbers were constantly decreasing. Naturally, all of them ended up being killed by the aliens. To make matters worse, the island's communication was completely cut off at this time. It must have been John and his group who cut the underwater trunk line earlier. Tango Company also cooperated from the outside and jammed the satellite signal. Trapped by troubles both inside and out, the island fell into complete isolation. Now, all non-essential personnel on Dream Island have been evacuated. Several hybrid humans are being held in detention room number 1, but via internal communication. Jack reminded Boy, this detention room wasn't specifically designed for detaining synthetic beings. If those individuals decide to escape from prison, that place won't hold them for long.
Containment on the other creatures is good for now, but we are understaffed, and negative variables are increasing. I think you should consider evacuating.
But Boy still didn't think things had escaped his control. What made him feel a pity now was that he couldn't hear the octopus-eyed monster speak immediately, and couldn't find out everything it had experienced right away. The moment Boy thought of the possibilities ahead, he felt excited that would be an unprecedented conversation. The scene shifts to detention room number 1. The remaining 5 hybrid humans were all locked in the cage. Wendy stood inside it with a dark expression. In fact, this thing couldn't hold her. As long as she wanted to get out, all she had to do was wave her hand. Wendy was unhappy because of her brother's behavior earlier. At this moment, Curly suddenly said that he was the favorite, that he had never made a mistake and shouldn't be locked up here. Wendy specifically reminded Curly that in the book, Wendy Darling was the favorite of Peter Pan, but later, Wendy grew up. The angry Peter Pan even abducted Wendy's daughter Jane. Now the reason they were locked in the cage was that they could no longer be children, and Boy wouldn't allow them to be adults either. After hearing this, Curly fell into silence immediately. Mary said that they had long been dead and their graves were already a meter high, and now they were all ghosts.
What do ghosts do?
They haunt houses.
All this time, we've been afraid of them. But I think they should be afraid of us.
After saying that, Wendy watched Boy remotely through the monitor. Then she made the sound to control the aliens. The aliens outside the base took action immediately. The next second, all the monitors in the room malfunctioned. Obviously, this was also Wendy's doing. Boy hurriedly contacted David in the laboratory. Fortunately, he learned that the facilities in the laboratory were still functioning normally, and David was helping the new alien acclimate. David suggested that Boy send John back, otherwise, Tango Company would send more people over. This statement immediately provoked Boy, who kept swearing several times. David told Boy to calm down. It turned out that Boy had ADHD with severe inattention, and needed to take medication to control it at all times. But before David could continue persuading him, Wendy cut off their communication. Looking at the lamb locked in the cage, Boy rolled his eyes, and a bad idea suddenly popped into his mind. He had figured out who the eye monster should parasitize. At the same time, the guards on the island safely escorted the female researcher back to her room, then continued to evacuate non-essential personnel. But the next second, the equipment in the room turned on by itself. Needless to say, this must be Wendy's doing. When the female researcher noticed this, she hurriedly tried to turn it off, but by then, the equipment was beyond her control. The female researcher was extremely shocked and had to quickly smash the equipment. The scene shifts to Mike's former teammates. The group entered the building, preparing to go to the armory to get heavy weapons. The elevator actually opened automatically. The squad leader felt a little surprised, but the other teammates didn't take it seriously and even walked directly into the elevator. The squad leader had to follow them in, but the elevator suddenly stopped shortly after it started operating. Immediately after, the voice announcement said that the self-destruct program had been activated. Obviously, this was Wendy taking revenge for their previous obstruction. Watching the group escape from the top of the elevator on the monitor, Wendy immediately terminated the self-destruct program and refocused the monitor on her brother. At this moment, Ian asked Wendy if she was still angry with Mike. Wendy didn't refute Ian. Instead, she defended Mike. Mike stopped Mary because she had killed someone, but that didn't mean Mike wasn't on Wendy's side. Wendy immediately fell into deep thought. On the other side, Mike, who was locked in the same cage as John, was also thinking about this matter. He thought about his sister's anger towards him. He thought about their seemingly completely different stances. After walking around several times, Mike finally stepped forward to wake John up. At this time, John's modified arm had been restrained, so he temporarily couldn't escape from the cage.
How's the lung?
It turns out Charlie had already told John that Mike had a half-artificial lung implanted. In other words, Mike has long ceased to be a pure human. John smiled and asked Mike if it felt great to surpass humans, but everything comes with a price, especially things given by capitalist enterprises. Even if they risk everything, it's still not enough to pay for it. It seems John's modification was given by young Tangu's grandmother, and for that reason, he had to work for Tangu Company. Next, Mike recalled the past. When his sister was seriously ill back then, he had to go to other places to suppress riots. When Wendy missed Mike, she could only write letters to him. Every word in the letters was filled with longing for her brother. Moreover, when his sister was just born, his father had told Mike to take good care of her. Thinking of all this, a sense of guilt welled up in Mike's heart. At this moment, after throwing a little tantrum, Wendy also chose to forgive her brother. With a gentle wave of her hand, the cage door holding Mike and John opened. John reacted very quickly. He immediately stepped forward to lure the guard, then took the chance to knock the guard down. Seeing John attack so brutally, Mike hurried forward to stop him. He still wanted to save whoever he could. John then told him he'd better take the hybrid humans and leave, because John was going to destroy this place. After using the key to unlock the restraints on his hands, John headed straight for the laboratory where David was. David seemed to have no reaction at all, but in fact, he had long been ready to fight back. After breaking the glass that contained the alien plants, the two immediately engaged in a fierce fight. At first, they exchanged blows evenly, until John exerted his strength and threw David onto the table. David suffered a severe head injury, and white liquid immediately flowed from the corner of his mouth. Unfortunately, John made the fatal mistake of talking too much. He didn't kill David right away. Instead, he talked about John Henry and his 4.5-kilogram hammer. This is a story about a human who defeated a steam-powered drill at the cost of his own life.
In the end, man will always win. It's a question of will.
Didn't John Henry die of exhaustion?
At this moment, the alien creatures were already stirring. The next second, the alien plant used the broken hull to destroy the glass. It should be noted that John was still essentially human, so he was still the prey target of this kind of plant. David took the opportunity to choke John unconscious, and the entire process of their fight was seen by Wendy. Just at this moment, Boy ran to find them, but Wendy controlled the alien to return to the building through the ventilation duct. Unaware of this, Boy even dared to mock the few people for being locked up. At this moment, all the lost boys inside the cage had already seen through Boy's true nature. There was no one left who was willing to follow him anymore.
How about a story instead?
What's the story?
Boy couldn't hide the look of shock on his face, but out of confidence in himself, he still prepared to step into the cage. As he walked, Boy said that when he was a child, his biological father was a heavy drinker. The only right thing his father had done in his life was giving birth to him, a child of extraordinary intelligence. He was destined to become a genius boy who would rule the world. At the age of 6, Boy had already created his first synthetic human. Then he used that synthetic human to kill his father. After that, the synthetic human became Boy's new father. Nowadays, Boy has developed technology for immortality. You few lost boys are the best exhibits. And by then, I will earn countless wealth. But Wendy just looked at him quietly and retorted, "We are not your exhibits." These words annoyed Boy. He lost his temper and uttered obscenities. Both sides immediately fell into a confrontation. But the next second, Mary knocked down the guard. Boy was instantly left isolated and alone. Wendy told Boy to run quickly. They were going to play hide-and-seek with him. After Boy fled in a panic, Wendy quickly assigned tasks. She told Mary to go capture the female researcher, Charlie and Ian to go capture John and David, Curly to go take control of the remaining soldiers. As for the remaining target, Boy, Wendy would deal with him herself. The most important rule of all was that under no circumstances should they harm Mike. Let's first shift our focus to Charlie, thinking about the threat John had posed to him, and the harm John had done to Tom. Charlie grew more and more angry, determined to teach John a lesson. At this moment, David, with a broken back, was struggling to move, preparing to get a rope to tie John up. Soon, Charlie and Ian arrived at the laboratory. David had just told the two to go tie John up, but instead, he was the one tied up by them. Ian told David, "Your era is over, now it's our time." John explained that he had not harmed Charlie's mother, but Charlie still knocked John unconscious without hesitation. On the other side, the female researcher stared at the heavy rain outside the house, unable to calm down for a long time. She had a constant feeling that a disaster was about to strike. While she was in a daze, Mary had quietly slipped into the house, and in this way, the two met again. At this moment, Jack had found Mike, and said that boy wanted to talk to him about something related to his sister Wendy. So Mike followed Jack through the corridor, and finally arrived at Boy's office. But as soon as Mike entered, Jack locked the room tightly. Immediately after, Mike saw the deliberately opened cultivation pod, and the parasitic lamb inside was nowhere to be seen. The next second, a low sheep's bleat was heard not far away. After the octopus-eyed monster locked its gaze on Mike, it broke free from the sheep's eye socket. It launched an attack on Mike, which is the scene at the start of the video. At the critical moment, Wendy arrived just in time and saved her brother, but Jack just had to jump out and get in the way. Mike hit his head and fainted. In the middle of fighting Jack, Wendy saw that the eye monster was planning to parasitize her unconscious brother again. Jack was suddenly forced to stop moving. Only his eyes could still move. Wendy quickly figured it out. It turned out that Jack's mechanical device was connected to the network, just like those doors and monitors, so it was also under Wendy's control. After that, Wendy hurried to wake Mike up. At this moment, the octopus-eyed monster escaped through the hole in the floor. The siblings were alone together again. Neither of them knew what to do. Mike told his sister that he was sorry about what happened with Mary, but he had no other choice at that time. The world is very complicated. To save their friends, he had to stop Mary. But that didn't mean Mike didn't recognize that his sister was human. But Wendy told Mike that she wasn't an adult right then. She wasn't Marcy, and she wasn't Wendy either. She couldn't be who everyone wanted her to be. Upon hearing this, Mike fell into silence immediately. He didn't know what else to say. Fortunately, Wendy didn't press the issue. Instead, she took the initiative to give her brother an out. She said they needed to go meet those adults. She also added that she had sent something very special to go after Boy. The scene shifts to the laboratory. A few of Mike's former teammates had no idea what they were thinking. They actually ran into a restricted area off-limits to humans to evacuate non-essential personnel. It can only be said that they were asking for death. Soon, the alien plant set its sights on the woman with dreadlocks. The next second, the only remaining squad leader was also knocked unconscious by Curly. At the same time, the mature alien charged back into the building once again. Over here, Boy was still notifying all surviving members on the island. He announced that he would urgently evacuate Dream Island by spaceship. Whoever found him first would be rewarded with 1 million. But when he turned around, he encountered the little cutie. When Boy felt a chill run down his spine and couldn't help but turn around to look behind him, the little cutie darted in front of him. Looking at the little cutie baring its teeth, Boy was so scared that he didn't dare to move an inch. Just at this moment, Wendy and Mike arrived by elevator, but right after that, 3 guards also ran over to join the fray. Wendy immediately ordered the alien to take down those 3. This time, Mike didn't stop her. Instead, he stepped forward together with his sister. Just when Boy thought he was saved, they kicked him unconscious. On the other side, the octopus-eyed monster that had escaped the building reached the seaside and stumbled upon a human body. It can only be said that Tom was unlucky, first attacked by a facehugger, then tormented by the eye monster. At this time, Tangu Company's plane had already arrived at Dream Island, ready to retrieve the alien assets. It was obvious that the chaos was far from over, and when Boy woke up again, the tables had completely turned. There, David, Boy, John, the female researcher, and Jack, all these adults were tied up in a cage by Wendy. Wendy told Boy that she had figured it out. Boy wasn't Peter Pan, nor was he a child who would never grow up. He had always been a despicable and angry villain. In fact, Boy hated everyone just like her own father did. At this moment, even if Boy was angry, he had no other tricks up his sleeve. He could only quietly listen to Wendy's accusations against him. At this moment, Curly came to report that the alien plant and the octopus-eyed monster had escaped.
Now we rule.
That's all for the 8 episodes of Alien Earth. This drama is a sci-fi series that intertwines alien monsters with human social conflicts. At this point, Earth is controlled by several major corporations. After the spaceships of Wayland and Tangu Company crashed, the two forces plotted against each other to compete for resources, triggering a series of events. The setting of hybrid humans is inherently provocative and discussion-worthy. Wendy was originally a 12-year-old girl with a terminal illness. The company transferred her consciousness into a mechanical body, turning her into a hybrid human. She can tear through steel plates with her bare hands, yet still retains the mindset of a young girl. Every day, she secretly watches her brother's life through surveillance cameras. She seems to be living a decent life, but in reality, Genius Company uses immortality as a pretense to turn children into obedient weapons. As the boss of the child prodigy-founded company, Boy appears to be a promising young genius on the surface, but in fact, his mind is filled with ideas of how to use hybrid humans to control the world. Of course, this drama also has many flaws. Many times, the characters seem to have their intelligence lowered, with almost no sense of safety awareness. Besides, the laboratory's security is ridiculously poor. Password-protected doors can be opened easily. However, these shortcomings can't overshadow the drama's highlights. The communication between Wendy and the alien larvae transforms the aliens from mere killing machines into intelligent creatures. This can be regarded as a major breakthrough in the alien universe. In the final episode, conflicts among all parties erupt completely. Wendy, along with the Lost Boys, takes control of Dream Island. The plot of the next season will presumably revolve around resisting the invasion of Weyland and Tengu Company. Although the logic is flawed in some parts of the drama, its reflections on human nature and technology are quite profound. It is suitable for viewers who enjoy the Alien series and social satire. It is hoped that the director and screenwriters will continue their efforts to further enrich and optimize the major IP of Alien. That's all for today's video. Thank you all for watching. Your likes, comments, and follows are the best encouragement for us. See you in the next episode.